What happens when a CEO buys fried chicken at his own restaurant, and here's something that makes him stop cold. Logan Carter, the CEO of Carter's Crispy Chicken, a fast-growing chain with 25 locations, had built his business from the ground up, with a focus on great food, fast service, and a warm, welcoming atmosphere. He prided himself on creating not just a place to eat, but a place where employees love to work and customers love to return. But lately, things hadn't felt quite right. Logan Carter stared at the fried chicken on his plate. Something was wrong. After 15 years as the COO of Southern Bites, he knew his grandmother's recipe better than anyone, and this wasn't it. The golden brown crust lacked the signature aroma that had built their empire, now struggling with a 15% drop in customer satisfaction. Complaints about unfriendly service and chaotic management were quietly piling up, and turnover rates among staff were higher than ever. His regional managers assured him everything was under control, blaming a few bad hires and normal growing pains. Still, Logan couldn't shake the feeling that something deeper was wrong. Frustrated and determined to find out the truth for himself, he went undercover, blending in as just another hungry customer. But just as he was about to pick up his order, he overheard two employees talking, and what they said made him freeze. What he didn't expect was to overhear two employees at the next table, whispering about selling recipes to their biggest competitor. "No one can tell the difference anyway," one laughed. Logan froze, his fork suspended in midair. His undercover visit had just uncovered something far worse than poor management. It was betrayal from within. Logan Carter adjusted the plastic name tag clipped to his shirt. Larry Cooper, it read. Standing in the back corner of the Memphis branch of Southern Bites, Logan looked less like the polished COO of a once thriving fried chicken empire, and more like an awkward new hire. The not a new organized navy blue suit tags that hung from a hub at a Freiburg near the back. Larry and his forehead furrowed. He glanced around the dining area. This place wasn't just struggling, it looked tired. The ceiling tiles above the cash register sagged slightly at the edges. The menus on display were sun-faded and curling at the corners, and only a handful of customers were scattered throughout the booths. It was lunchtime, but the quiet murmur of voices made the space feel too large, almost hollow. From his office in New York, Logan had seen the spreadsheets and reports, but none of the numbers hinted at this kind of neglect. Southern Bites had been built on pride, on the promise of food that felt like home. But this dining room, with its flickering lights and lack of warmth, couldn't have been further from the family atmosphere Grandma Carter had envisioned when she started this business decades ago. Logan took in a deep breath and moved toward the kitchen. He needed to focus. This wasn't about memories or aesthetics anymore. Something deeper was wrong here, and he was determined to figure it out. The kitchen was organized, but barely. It wasn't chaos per se, but there was an air of low-grade unease, like the staff was constantly a half step behind where they needed to be. Only 3 staff members worked the line, their movements efficient but tense. Logan had read in a previous report that this branch needed 5 cooks to handle even a slow lunch, but for some reason the crew had been cut down. He stood awkwardly by the prep station until a younger employee with a tired smile waved him over. "You're Larry, right, new guy?" the woman said without looking up, the shine of sweat visible near her hairline. "Grab those boxes over there. Customers are waiting." Logan hesitated for a fraction of a second, scanning the crowded counter where paper boxes sat collapsed in neat stacks. He walked over, grabbed a stack balancing on the edge, and fumbled, cursing softly under his breath as the whole pile spilled to the floor. The younger employee walked past him, scooping up a couple of boxes on her way. "Careful, Larry," she said dryly. "First rule of the kitchen, don't slow down." She didn't sound mad, but there was a tiredness in her voice that hit harder than irritation might have. Logan knelt quickly to pick up the mess, more embarrassed than he cared to admit. He wanted to blend in, to observe without drawing too much attention to himself. But it was hard. Logan had spent years running board meetings and signing papers, not assembling takeout orders under the relentless hue of fluorescent lights. He managed to build a few boxes after another employee showed him the exact steps. The cardboard felt flimsy in his hands, and as he looked over to the fry line, he caught sight of one employee scowling at a timer that beeped persistently, calling attention to the next batch of chicken in the fryer. These employees looked stressed, trained, likely hard-working, but undeniably on edge. Logan realized they weren't taking shortcuts because they didn't care. It was because they didn't have a choice. Bigger gaps started to appear before his eyes with every minute he spent in that kitchen. Orders were coming in faster than they could be filled, and the tension inside the small workspace grew. When customers came up to the counter with minor complaints, Logan saw the supervisor, a man with a tight-lipped expression, wave them off. "It's fine," he heard. "We don't have time for that." Each dismissal struck Logan like a gut punch. Southern Bites was supposed to be about treating every customer like family. Where had that gone? The feeling of disconnection started to ache in Logan's chest. He hadn't been on a restaurant floor in years. He'd let the company grow distant, relying on others to tell him how things were running instead of seeing it for himself. But the real tipping point came with more subtle details. Logan noticed an elderly couple sitting near the window, their food pushed to the edge of the table as they whispered to one another and shook their heads. Customers, who'd likely been visiting since the early days, now quietly dissatisfied with what this place had become. Somewhere in the back of the kitchen, Logan saw the familiar logo of Southern Bites prominently displayed on the spice rack. At least, he thought it was theirs. The large black and red packaging looked a little off, but Logan couldn't quite place why at first. On closer inspection, an entire row of spice bottles didn't match his memory. They all bore labels that were reminiscent of the company's branding but included words like new and improved on some of the bottles. He glanced back toward the fry line and noticed how mechanically one of the cooks handled the chicken dredge before tossing it into the oil. This part of the process had always looked like second nature to staff. In the past, quick but careful, each piece seasoned just right. Here it felt robotic, rushed. Logan's mind raced as he began connecting the dots. If something as fundamental as the spice mix had been altered, it might explain the growing number of customer complaints he'd seen in the company's reports. But why would anyone change the recipe? Had this branch gone rogue, or was it something bigger? For now, Logan kept his questions to himself. He wasn't ready to reveal the growing suspicion gnawing at his thoughts. Still, as the lunch rush began to slow and the dining area emptied out little by little, Logan's determination solidified. Whether these surface-level issues were the cause or just symptoms of a larger problem, he planned to find out. As the younger employee brushed past him again with a tray of freshly fried chicken, Logan couldn't help but glance once more at the unfamiliar spice rack. His thoughts turned back to his grandmother's recipe, the one she had scribbled by hand on a weathered piece of paper years ago, thick with spices, warmth, and soul. And yet, here he was, standing in a kitchen that barely felt connected to that legacy. By the end of his shift, Logan felt more disconnected than he ever had before, but it was different this time. This wasn't a vague discomfort in a boardroom. It was tangible. He could feel it in the tension of the staff, in the peeling paint of the back walls, in the worn-out voices of the staff asking customers to please be patient. Every piece of it pointed to something being fundamentally broken. Logan sat at a small table near the back wall, an inconspicuous spot he chose intentionally. In front of him rested a tray holding the very food his business was known for, Southern Bites chicken. He picked up a crisp piece of drumstick, the surface glistening under the dull dining room lights. His grandmother's recipe, the one that had built an empire, was created to evoke a sense of comfort, her signature spice blend unmistakable in its warmth and subtlety. But as he took the first bite, Logan's jaw slowed mid-chew. Something felt off. Then, it wasn't immediately clear, but there was a hollowness to the taste. Not bad, exactly, just incomplete. He set the remainder of the drumstick down and stared at it for a moment. Running his tongue along his teeth, Logan tried to isolate what was missing. The balance of the seasoning was uneven, and the familiar complexity of his grandmother's spice mix, the way it layered flavors flightly, wasn't there. Instead, the chicken tasted muted, as if someone had substituted cheaper, blander spices to try to mimic the original. He took another bite, crisp flakes scattering onto his tray. But the absence of something crucial gnawed at him with every chew. Logan leaned back in his chair, observing the other customers. Most people seemed content, chatting lightly or scrolling on their phones between bites. To them, it was fried chicken, salty, crispy, and straightforward. But Logan knew the difference. His grandmother had poured years into perfecting her recipe. Every pinch of seasoning had a story behind it. It was the secret to why customers had been loyal for generations. That missing element wasn't just a flavor, it was the heart of Southern Bites, the invisible thread tying the past and present together. And yet no one around him seemed to notice it was gone. He glanced at the tray again, frowning. Did the other branches taste like this too? How long had this been happening? At a nearby table, two employees sat across from each other. One of them, a thin young man with dark circles under his eyes, hunched close, his voice low. "I'm telling you, it doesn't matter," he said, barely audible over the hum of the room. "No one even knows the difference." His name tag read Ethan. The woman across from him, Mia, stabbed at her mashed potatoes with a plastic fork. "Yeah, well, they'd notice if you overdid the cayenne again. Last week somebody came back complaining their tongue was on fire." Ethan rolled his eyes. "It was one batch. Doesn't make a difference as long as they eat it. Besides," he added, lowering his voice further, "it's Crispy King's problem now." Logan's muscles tensed as he strained to catch the rest of the conversation. Mia leaned in, her expression hard to read. "I don't like this. What if it gets traced back?" "Relax," Ethan cut her off, waving his hand dismissively. "We're nowhere in the chain. Just keep doing what you're doing and we'll be fine." Logan's chest tightened. He had only caught fragments, but the words struck with precision. Crispy King was Southern Bite's biggest competitor, a company that had long tried unsuccessfully to replicate its success. Could they have somehow gotten hold of his grandmother's recipe? Logan froze mid-reach as his fork hovered above a piece of chicken. Ethan's last comment echoed in his mind. It's Crispy King's problem now. Exactly was it. And how deep did this go? Mia sighed and crossed her arms, her voice carrying a touch of guilt beneath her measured tone. "Still doesn't sit right with me. We're screwing with customers, Ethan. That wasn't part of the deal. It's business," he muttered, "and it's not like anyone here cares about this place anymore. Why should we?" Logan couldn't eat another bite. He pushed the tray to the side, keeping his movements slow and controlled, trying to ensure neither employee noticed his eavesdropping. From what he'd overheard, this wasn't just about cutting corners or bad management. His suspicions deepened as he pieced it together. The spice blend in the kitchen, the muted flavors in the chicken, this wasn't an accident. Someone had intentionally altered his grandmother's recipe, and now it was being passed along to Crispy King. Rising quietly, Logan made his way to the counter, glancing at the busy kitchen beyond. His eyes fell back on the spice rack he had noticed earlier in the day. The bottles stood in neat rows, their labels bold and slick, but distinctly different from how he remembered them. It wasn't just a branding update recognized logos. Logan had reviewed every ingredient once Southern Bites switched to mass distribution. Sliding his hands into his pockets, Logan observed Ethan and Mia from a safe distance. Their casual attitude toward the betrayal unnerved him almost as much as the act itself. Ethan's dismissiveness, his focus on personal gain over integrity, it wasn't just frustrating, it was dangerous. The very foundation of Southern Bites rested on customer trust, and these employees saw it as disposable. What shocked Logan even more was the possibility that they weren't acting alone. The hints they dropped suggested something larger, more coordinated, operating beyond their local branch. He knew corporate recipe theft wasn't unheard of. A unique recipe like his grandmother's was the cornerstone of Southern Bite's identity, the one thing competitors couldn't replicate. Its unauthorized use by Crispy King would erode everything the Carter family had built over decades. Customers might not realize it at first, but over time, disloyalty to the original could ruin the reputation of both companies. Unlike the customers enjoying their lunch that day, Logan couldn't separate the business implications from the betrayal. It was all intertwined. As he stood there, undecided about his next move, his eyes caught Ethan tossing his brown paper apron onto his chair and heading toward the back exit. He walked with an air of carelessness, not checking over his shoulder as he slipped out. Logan considered following him, but decided against it. Without more context, there wasn't much he could do with what he overheard. For now, what mattered most of the call was confirming his growing suspicion. The unshakable feeling that Ethan and Mia were just two small threads in an even bigger web meant Logan needed to get closer, not confront them. Logan left the restaurant that evening with no appetite and few certainties. But one thing was clear: the missing flavor in the chicken wasn't just about taste. It was a symptom of something far more deliberate and much worse. If the employees he overheard were careless enough to speak so openly, it was only a matter of time before he uncovered the real motive behind the altered recipe. He wasn't sure how far up the betrayal went, or who was pulling the strings, but he knew one thing for certain. It hadn't just put his company's reputation at risk. It had tarnished the legacy his grandmother worked so hard to pass on. And back in his car, Logan stared out the windshield, his jaw clenched tightly. He didn't just want answers anymore, he needed them. The details were too scattered to connect right now, but the stakes continued to rise with each passing moment. Whatever Ethan and Mia were involved in, it was merely the surface of a much darker operation. Fake spices, altered recipes, and quiet deals with Crispy King had opened the door to something his company might struggle to come back from. As he drove away that evening, Logan made a choice. To truly understand what was happening, he'd have to get closer to the culprits themselves, playing his role as Larry Cooper to perfection, until the truth came to light. Logan's second week undercover began much like the first, with him trying to observe quietly while blending in as Larry Cooper. But the more time he spent in the Memphis branch, the more cracks began to expose themselves. His focus shifted from Ethan and Mia to the man running the entire location, Ryan Mitchell, the branch manager. Ryan was a sharp dresser for a guy responsible for a fast casual restaurant, always wearing a neatly pressed button-up shirt, a polished silver watch, and shoes that looked out of place on the greasy back tile of a restaurant kitchen. Logan noticed a pattern with him almost immediately. Ryan rarely joined the hustle. If there was a rush of orders at the counter or a delivery truck needing to be unloaded, Ryan was nowhere near the chaos. Instead, he holed up in his office, stepping out only to bark instructions or to cut expenses in ways none of the employees appreciated. That first Wednesday, Logan watched as Ryan hovered by the fry line, rubbing his chin. "We're burning through breading mix too fast," Ryan said to one of the cooks. "Start using less." The cook looked stunned but didn't argue. Logan saw him quietly grimace as he began dredging the chicken into less of the familiar mix, his movements slower, more cautious. Customers might not have noticed the thinner breading right away, but Logan recognized the shift immediately. That was just one of many cost-cutting measures Ryan enforced throughout the week. From delayed equipment repairs to buying pre-frozen sides instead of preparing fresh ones, the decisions all added up: cheaper food, faster shortcuts, and none of the care that gave Southern Bites its edge. Still, it didn't stop at questionable management decisions. Late one evening, Logan volunteered to help clean up after the restaurant had closed. Only a skeleton crew remained, including Ethan, who seemed unusually comfortable staying after hours. Logan quietly mopped the dining area while keeping an ear out for their back-of-house conversations. He had learned by now that Ethan's late-night chats often veered into suspicious territory, but nothing could have prepared him for what he overheard that night. Through the crack of the kitchen door, Logan heard Ethan muttering into his phone. No, I told him I couldn't move more this week. If Ryan asks, I'll manage, but Jacob's already breathing down my neck. Yeah, fine, Thursday. Whatever. The way Ethan muttered the word Jacob froze Logan in place. For a moment it played as something insignificant in his mind, a common enough name, until it clicked. Jacob Reynolds, Logan's trusted colleague, the man he had worked alongside for 8 years. It had to be. Jacob had overseen operations and supply chain management for Southern Bites for years, and Logan had considered him more than just competent. He had all but relied on Jacob to uphold the brand's values and processes for the years. The idea that Jacob might be involved in any underhanded dealings was almost impossible to. The following day, Logan kept himself busy in the kitchen while trying to piece everything together. If Jacob was involved, and that "if" was growing smaller by the hour, it explained the widespread changes he had been seeing: altered recipes, odd supply decisions, and silent cost-cutting practices. It even explained the connections he suspected between Crispy King and stolen recipes. But why? Jacob already had immense trust and influence within the company, and his career had flourished just as much as Logan's. What was he gaining? It wasn't until the pieces started connecting with Ryan's behavior that the picture became clearer. By Friday night, Logan found his answer, or at least part of it. Ethan, growing more careless, left a locker in the back storage area slightly ajar. Inside, Logan spotted a manila folder wedged between an old sweatshirt and a battered pair of sneakers. He glanced over his shoulder and, seeing no one else around, carefully pulled it out. Inside, the folder contained handwritten notes on branch-wide budget cuts, order discrepancies, and changes made to management practices. All of them were dated back months, far before Logan even started noticing the company's decline. A sticky note clinging to one corner of the folder bore the initials J.R., Jacob Reynolds. There was no doubt anymore. Jacob wasn't just encouraging cutbacks, he was coordinating them. And those changes weren't about saving Southern Bites, they were about gutting it from the inside out. Logan's hands were shaking when he returned the file and backed away from the locker. By the time he started closing that evening, the realization weighed like concrete in the pit of his stomach. Jacob wasn't just stealing recipes to pass along to Crispy King. He was intentionally sabotaging Southern Bites through every avenue available, altering supply chains, manipulating stock, and undermining quality until the brand collapsed under its own weight. Sabotage, plain and simple. The following Monday brought fresh waves of tension. Logan kept his head down, scanning for clues while deliberately steering clear of Ryan, Ethan, and Mia. It wasn't until he overheard Ryan in the break room talking just a little too loud on a call that the final stakes started to reveal themselves. Logan, pretending to balance bottles on a shelf nearby, caught fragments of Ryan's conversation. He wanted the dirt on health violations this week, but Jacob says he's got something bigger lined up. False inventory shortages. It'll be enough to send the media buzzing, I promise. Crispy King's got the timing locked. Logan's blood ran cold. False shortages, media leaks. It had gone past stealing recipes and penny-pinching management. This was something much worse. Jacob and his conspirators weren't trying to compete with Southern Bites. They were trying to burn it to the ground, ruin its credibility, and scoop up its ashes. For pennies on the dollar, Crispy King could take over Southern Bites' prime locations, leaving thousands of employees scrambling for work. With each passing hour, Logan felt the pressure mounting. He needed more evidence, something concrete to tie all the players together, but the risks of blowing his cover grew with every move he made. Ryan, seemingly growing suspicious, started eyeing him more during shifts. Ethan, too, kept a tighter watch on his surroundings, though his sloppiness occasionally worked in Logan's favor. On Tuesday, Ethan slipped again, muttering to Mia in an even "Jacob's meeting Walter Reed soon," he said. Logan recognized the name immediately. Crispy King's notorious CEO. To catch those two together would take the conspiracy beyond hearsay. It would be the linchpin, the undeniable proof. Logan didn't wait any longer to make his decision. By the end of his shift that night, he quietly reached out to Diana Chin, head of Southern Byte's security team, to coordinate his next steps. A plan was forming to not only prove Jacob's betrayal, but also to bring down the entire operation before the conspirators had a chance to do more harm. Diana Chin wasn't someone Logan interacted with often before this. As head of security, her role typically revolved around managing small internal infractions or ensuring compliance with local regulations. But now she sat across from him, her posture straight, her gaze sharp. Between them on the table lay the foundation of what might be the most important plan Southern Byte had ever attempted. Logan slid the piece of paper across to her, a rough, handwritten mock-up of his grandmother's recipe. Only this one had been deliberately altered. The ratios were off, some key ingredients replaced with bitter imitations, and one crucial component completely removed. Diana picked it up and studied it for a moment before setting it down with a faint smirk. "They'll never know it's fake until it's too late," she said. Her tone was steady, professional, but there was a slight hint of amusement in her expression. Logan nodded, though the weight of the situation kept him from sharing her moment of lightness. "It has to work," he replied. "If this fails, they'll know we're onto them. And Jacob will adapt. We lose the chance to catch him, and the company's done." Diana leaned forward, folding her hands on the table. "It will work. We'll embed it with enough red flags to trace every move after it leaves the server. Once he takes the bait, there's no going back for them." The plan was deceptively simple in theory. Diana would upload the fake recipe to a secure server classified for executive access only, ensuring Jacob couldn't resist the temptation. Once downloaded, the recipe's metadata would automatically flag the transfer and allow Diana to monitor its movement in real time. Any involvement from Crispy King would leave a clear trail of evidence. Logan, for his part, would play his role as Larry Cooper to maintain his cover while observing the conspirators directly. That night, Diana finalized the document and uploaded it to the server, labeling it as an updated version of Southern Byte's signature recipe. It was thorough enough to look convincing but deliberately flawed to ensure it was an edible and obvious counterfeit to anyone with real cooking knowledge. Logan sat beside her, watching in silence as she typed in the final commands and leaned back in her chair. The screen glowed faintly in the dim room, the words "File uploaded successfully" reflecting off her glasses. "The clock starts now," she said, closing her laptop. For the next 3 days, the tension within Logan built like a stretched rubber band. Back in the Memphis kitchen, Ryan's instructions grew sharper, his movements quicker, and Ethan seemed to have a perpetual edge of paranoia in his tone. Even Mia, who usually worked with quiet efficiency, went about her tasks in what Logan could only describe as distracted guilt. She tripped over the flat edge of a mop once and whispered apologies to anyone within earshot. On Thursday, the pieces began to move. Logan noticed Jacob's initials listed in the server log from Diana's daily updates. He had accessed the file. The bait was taken. Logan lingered near the dishwashing station during a lull, barely paying attention to the greasy tray in his hands as his mind turned over the unfolding events. That evening, Diana called to confirm Jacob had downloaded the recipe and forwarded it to a third party outside their internal network. Though Crispy King was unnamed in the logs, it was impossible to mistake their CEO's email domain. Walter Rafika's corporate address was embedded in the chain. "Got him," Diana said over the phone. There was satisfaction in her voice, but Logan felt no relief yet. Within the Memphis branch, changes became apparent almost immediately. Ryan, who had always maintained an air of subtle distance, shifted to a more visible role, observing the staff and barking orders with unusual intensity. Logan noticed the way Ryan's eyes scanned the room more than usual, his attempts at control giving away an underlying nervousness. Logan understood it. For Mia, however, that nervousness seemed to take a different shape. It wasn't long before she approached Logan at the prep table one afternoon, her shoulders hunched slightly and her eyes darting to make sure no one else was. "Hey, Larry," she started quietly, her voice strained. "How long you planning to stay at this job?" Logan looked at her, carefully masking the suspicion he felt, not sure why. She exhaled and shifted uncomfortably. "Just doesn't it feel like something's wrong here, like not normal wrong, bigger?" "Yak," Logan replied after a pause. "It does. What's on your mind?" Mia hesitated, chewing her bottom lip. For a moment she seemed ready to speak her piece, but then she simply shook her head. "Never mind, forget I said anything," she mumbled before walking away. The hesitation only fueled Logan's suspicion. He could see as Mia was faltering, her guilt threatening to outweigh her role in the conspiracy. Logan wondered how far that guilt would take her, and if it might ultimately give him the break he needed. By Friday evening, Diana called again. This time, her tone was both urgent and triumphant. "I've got the change," she said. Logan leaned against the driver's seat of his car, pressing his phone tightly to his ear as she explained. The email chain traced Jacob directly to Walter Reed, outlining the specifics of their deal. It confirmed exactly what Logan had suspected. Jacob wasn't just sabotaging Southern Bites for personal gain. He was working in tandem with Crispy King to undermine the company's integrity from every angle. "Timing couldn't be better," Diana added. "Ryan's been shifting around the office more than usual. Feels like they're gearing up for something bigger. Might be time to set the confrontation." Logan allowed himself to exhale, though the weight pressing against his chest hadn't eased entirely. "Did you secure everything? We can't leave gaps in the evidence." "Encrypted and verified," she replied. "Emails, transfer records, timestamps, all of it. We just need the right moment to call them out." That night, as Logan locked the door to his humble motel room, he sat on the edge of the bed and stared at his phone. The screen displayed the full encrypted file Diana had compiled, a mix of recordings, written summaries, and verified logs linking every detail together. It was all there. He had what he needed to expose them. Back at the Memphis branch, the kitchen was unusually quiet for a Friday night. The lull struck Logan more as unease than routine, like the employees could feel the shift in the air but couldn't quite name it. Logan caught a glimpse of Ryan moving through the dining area, his expression drawn tight. The trap had been set, and the bait had worked. But Logan knew the real challenge wasn't over yet. There was still the confrontation, the moment when every layer of the conspiracy would unfold. He couldn't predict how Jacob, Ryan, or the rest of the conspirators might react, but he knew he had to be ready. As Logan prepared to head into the branch for one final showdown, one thought kept circling back in his mind. The legacy his grandmother built rested on what he would do next. There was no room for error. Logan stood near the back of the Memphis branch dining room, blending into the small crowd of employees called in for what they thought was a routine after-hours meeting. It had been framed as a management briefing, something mundane and uneventful. The conspirators, unaware of the setup, filtered in with casual confidence. Ryan leaned against the back counter, occasionally glancing at his phone, while Ethan sat slouched in a metal chair, tapping his foot and chuckling at something Mia whispered. Jacob Reynolds entered last, his expression calm and unreadable. Logan had always known Jacob to carry himself with composure, but tonight his face seemed unnervingly closed off, a mask betraying nothing. Walter Reed, Crispy King's CEO, didn't bother hiding his sharp gaze, taking everything in with an air of calculated patience. Logan watched from the corner, still posed as Larry Cooper, the new and entirely invisible kitchen hire. Diana Chin arrived shortly afterward, walking in briskly and handing Logan a small nod. She carried a quiet but commanding presence, not one to overstep in the moment, but fully aware of the week's second carried after the weeks of preparation. Logan stepped forward then, peeling his visor from his head and tossing it on a nearby table. The movement alone caused a ripple of confusion among the group. Some employees shifted in their chairs, uncertain of what was unfolding, while the conspirators showed varying flashes of unease. Ryan straightened, his arms crossing tightly over his chest. Ethan's foot stopped tapping. Jacob tilted his head slightly, watching, still motionless. "I think it's time we drop the act," Logan said, his voice firm but steady. He slipped the plastic name tag labeled Larry Cooper from his shirt, flipping it onto the counter with a small clatter. "Let me reintroduce myself. My name is Logan Carter, and I know exactly what's been happening here." The room fell unusually quiet. An employee near the back gasped lightly, but no one spoke. Ryan's confusion quickly gave way to discomfort. Ethan looked as though he had just swallowed something sour, while Jacob's face remained eerily stoic, though Logan saw a flicker of something darker, recognition perhaps. Walter adjusted the edge of his tie, his smirk faint but deliberate. Logan raised his hand, holding a folder packed with the evidence Diana had helped him compile over the past 2 weeks. He let it speak for him at first, raising it high enough for everyone in the room to see. "This folder right here is full of the proof we've gathered. Emails, transfers, records showing exactly how you've stolen our recipes, disrupted supply chains, manipulated stock prices, and sold out this company's customers. So please don't waste my time pretending nothing's wrong." Ryan flinched, his mouth opening slightly, but no words came out. Logan ignored the false start, pulling a piece of paper from the folder before continuing. "You see, at first I didn't want to believe it, that someone I trusted, someone who helped us grow Southern Bites, could betray everything this company stands for. But the facts don't lie." He approached the group slowly, the paper still pinched between his fingers. "Jacob Reynolds, my once trusted operations colleague, partnered with Walter Reed. Together you've been dismantling my company one branch at a time, haven't you?" Jacob's expression hardened ever so slightly. "You've always been too naive," he said calmly, his hands resting loosely at his sides. "You inherited everything. Your grandmother built Southern Bites. You walked into it like it was a gift handed down to you, never knowing what building from the ground up actually looks like." His voice didn't rise, but it carried a sharp edge. "You think loyalty keeps companies alive? No, Logan, strategy does. And the strategy you lacked is what's given Crispy King the edge." Logan's jaw tightened for a brief moment before he spoke. "My grandmother built this company with nothing but a recipe and determination," he said firmly, his voice cutting through Jacob's measured tone. "She didn't cut corners, and she didn't betray her customers or her employees just to get ahead. What you've done isn't strategy, it's sabotage." Walter's confidence began to falter as Logan revealed the final piece of the plan. "And just so you know," Logan said, directing this last part at him, "that recipe you stole from the system. Fake. Completely inedible. Looks like Crispy King's been busy packaging a disaster. You should have stuck to your own recipes." The sound of doors opening caught everyone's attention. 2 uniformed police officers stepped into the room, led by Deanna Chin, whose calm expression gave Logan the reassurance he hadn't realized he needed. The officers moved methodically, their presence immediate but free of any unnecessary theatrics. "Walter Reed, Jacob Reynolds, Ryan Mitchell," one of the officers began, holding a list. "You are under arrest on charges including conspiracy, corporate theft, and fraud. Anything you say can and will be used against you in a court of law." Ryan's panic erupted first. "It was all Jacob's idea," he sputtered, backing toward the wall as the officers approached. "I didn't want to. I didn't even know half of this." His words tumbled over one another, desperate but tangled. Jacob, meanwhile, snapped out of his calm detachment, his own mask finally breaking. "Logan's no saint," he shouted, his voice raw and unfiltered for the first time. "You think he's clean. He's lived off stolen ideas, off someone else's work." But the room didn't sway to Jacob's accusations. The remaining employees stared at him in disbelief, their expressions a mix of shock and quiet relief. Mia, standing slightly apart from the chaos, looked like everything she'd been holding inside was finally crashing down on her. Her face was pale, but her lips pressed together, almost as if she had been waiting for this moment to come. Logan's attention barely lingered on Jacob's outburst. As the officers snapped handcuffs around the conspirators' wrists and began leading them away, he noticed a distinct calm settling over the room. Ethan, who had gone silent the moment Logan revealed himself, now sat motionless, his hands bouncing between Logan and the now even space speech, where their corrupt branch manager had once stood. In the stillness, Logan pulled one final item from his folder, a laminated copy of his grandmother's original recipe, the one that had defined Southern Bites. Holding it up briefly, he let the room absorb the sight. "It's back where it belongs," he said quietly. "The legacy my family built isn't going anywhere." Words didn't hang heavily in the air, they landed softly, a note of reassurance cutting through the otherwise tense atmosphere. Mia took a hesitant step forward, biting her lip. Hesitant. Is it over?" she asked, her voice barely above a whisper. Logan nodded once. "It's over, but now comes the hard part, making it right." The mood shifted subtly as employees began to murmur quietly among themselves, some exchanging glances, others still processing what had unfolded. Logan's eyes lingered on the group for a moment longer before turning toward the front doors. Stepping outside, he let the cool evening air hit his face. The wind carried a hint of the crisp fall season ahead. As the adrenaline that had been fueling him for weeks began to fade, Logan found his thoughts settling on the future. The mess left behind would take time to clean, but perhaps the road forward wouldn't be so unfamiliar. Logan Carter could feel the weight of the silence in the boardroom as he explained his plan to rebuild Southern Bites. The table was lined with skeptical faces, shareholders, regional managers, and investors who all held the same question in their narrowed eyes. Could Southern Bites recover? Logan answered calmly, laying out every detail. The plan wasn't just about salvaging the company's reputation. It was about making sure the foundation would never crack again. But the skepticism lingered. Their doubt was expected, though Logan knew the results would speak for themselves. The first step was making it clear to the employees that this company belonged to them, as much as it had ever belonged to the Carter family. Logan announced the launch of a profit-sharing program during an all-hands meeting, standing in the very same restaurant kitchen where much of the damage had begun. The walls still wore their cracks. The space felt small and worn. But Logan's promise was every employee from the frontline cashiers to the back-of-house fry cooks would see their hard work reflected in the company's success. "No one works harder for Southern Bites than the people in these kitchens," Logan said. "You deserve more than just a paycheck. You deserve a share in this legacy." The message resonated, though not everyone accepted it immediately. Employees who had worked under managers like Ryan remained cautious, unsure whether this time would feel any different. The wounds left by broken leadership didn't heal overnight. During one of the quieter moments after the announcement, Logan overheard a veteran cook mutter under his breath to a coworker, "We'll see if this isn't just more talk." Logan didn't respond, but it fueled his determination. Actions, not promises, would win them back. Another major component of the plan came as a surprise to many. Mia, one of the employees tied to the earlier conspiracy, had been given a second chance, not just to redeem herself, but to lead. Logan appointed her to head a new employee assistance program designed to help staff deal with financial and personal pressures. It was a practical solution to a hard truth Logan had come to terms with during his time undercover. Financial struggles pushed people to make bad decisions. Conservator Bites would make sure its employees had support systems in place before desperation became betrayal. Mia's appointment wasn't welcomed by everyone. Whispers followed her through the halls in the early weeks, and some staff openly questioned whether she deserved such a crucial role. Still, Logan stood by the decision. "It's not just about redemption," he explained at a company meeting. "Mia understands better than anyone what happens when employees feel abandoned. She's lived it, and she's the right person to make sure none of you feel that way again." Slowly, employees began to come around. Mia approached her role with quiet resolve, setting up financial workshops, stress management seminars, and a small emergency fund for employees to use in difficult times. It wasn't long before her sincerity started to change people's minds. The real turning point, however, came in the kitchen. Southern Bites had always been built on its food, and Logan understood that their recovery had to start with the same promise that had defined the company from the beginning: quality. During a meeting with the executive chef, Logan worked late into the night poring over old recipe cards written in his grandmother's handwriting. He remembered the way she used to test every ingredient herself, spending hours in the kitchen with her sleeves rolled up and flour dusting her elbows. Together, they decided to honor her memory by introducing a new signature item: Grandma Carter's Legacy Chicken. The dish was unveiled in a carefully planned event held in the dining room of the flagship Memphis location. People from the neighborhood, longtime customers, and employees gathered as Logan stood behind a modest podium. "This isn't just chicken," he told the crowd. "This is why my grandmother fought to build Southern Bites from nothing. It's about care, hard work, and a promise that what's served on that plate is something I'd be proud to share with family." The room buzzed with excitement as the first samples were served. The dish wasn't just familiar, it was nostalgic, a reminder of what Southern Bites had always strived to be. Customers left glowing reviews, their words echoing something Logan had been waiting to hear again: "It tastes like home." While employees began to warm to the changes, not all doubt disappeared at once. Shareholders remained wary, unconvinced that a sentimental return to company values would be enough to bounce back from such a damaging scandal. Logan met directly with them in another boardroom weeks after his initial pitch, this time emphasizing results over ideals. He pulled up sales charts that showed a slow but steady rise and played a short clip of customer testimonials recorded during the Legacy Chicken launch. He didn't use flowery language or grand gestures. He let the progress tell the story. His closing comment to the group was simple: "This company lost its way because people stopped believing in what it stood for. That's what we're bringing back." It wasn't just customers who noticed the difference. The culture inside Southern Bites kitchens began to shift as well. Employees who had long considered their shifts just a job began showing subtle signs of pride. At the end of one lunch rush, Logan watched as a team of cooks quickly finished up at Almad, confidently heading home. The same atmosphere extended to the dining rooms, where regulars began staying longer, ordering an extra drink, chatting with staff, remarking on how things felt differently. Logan saw it most clearly when employees stopped addressing him as "Sir" and instead began greeting him with. The changes weren't only felt on the ground floor. Southern Bites stock, which had hit historic lows during the conspiracy fallout, started climbing. Slowly at first, with analysts cautiously noting a measured recovery, but eventually with enough momentum to make even the industry skeptics pay attention. By the 6th-month mark, the company's stock hit an all-time high. For Logan, the numbers weren't what mattered most, but he understood their value. Southern Bites had gone from the brink of collapse to becoming a model of resilience. Still, Logan didn't view the comeback as an invitation to ease up. He made it a point to spend time in his restaurants regularly, not just watching but listening to employees on the floor. During one visit to a small Mississippi branch, he shared a story with the evening crew as they sat down for dinner. "Grandma always used to say, 'Treat customers like family, but treat your team even better.' She believed that if you took care of the people behind the counter, they'd take care of everything else." The team nodded as they ate, some smiling, others tapping the table as if to acknowledge her wisdom. By the time Logan returned to Memphis, the storm that had nearly destroyed Southern Bites felt like a distant memory. Yet, as Logan walked out of the branch's glass doors one brisk evening, he knew there was no finish line to what his company had started. Rebuilding wasn't just about repairing damage, it was about proving that the values his grandmother had built Southern Bites on would never fade. The neon red "Open" sign on the window glowed faintly behind him as he stopped briefly on the cold air. Logan didn't need another reminder of how far they'd come, but he welcomed the thought anyway. Logan Carter had everything most business leaders chase: profits, expansion, and an established brand. But when it all started to crumble, he realized true success wasn't built on numbers by dynamic, unobservant character of grandmother's values of family, integrity, and hard work. He uncovered the heart of what Southern Bites had lost. His journey reminds us that leadership isn't about standing above others, it's about standing alongside them. Through confronting corruption and empowering employees, Logan proved that thriving businesses come from doing what's right. His story challenges us to reflect on our own workplaces and lead with purpose.